Vadis, chapter 26. Next morning he woke up weak, with a cold head and a free fever. It seemed to him that a whispered conversation had roused him, but when he opened his eyes, Ligia was not there. Ursus, stopping before the chimney, was ranking apart the grey ashes and seeking live coals beneath them. When he found some, he began to blow, not with his mouth, but as it were the bellows of a blacksmith. Vinicius, remembering how that man had crushed Croton the day before, examined with attention, befitting a lover of the arena, his gigantic back, which resembled the back of Cyclops, and his limbs strong as columns. Thanks to Mercury that my neck was not broken by him, thought Vinicius. By Pollux, if the other legions are like this one, the Danubian legions will have heavy work sometime. But aloud he said, "Hey, slave!" Ursus drew his head out of the chimney and, smiling in a manner almost friendly, said, "God give thee a good day, lord, and good health, but I'm a free man, not a slave." Vinicius, who wished to question Ursus touching Lygia's birthplace, these words produced a certain pleasant impression, for discourse with a free thought of a common man was less disagreeable to his Roman and patrician pride than with a slave in whom neither law nor custom recognized human nature. "Then does not belong to Aulus?" asked he. "No, lord. I serve Calina, as I serve her mother of my own will." Here he hid his head again in the chimney, and blew the coals on which he had placed some wood. When he had finished, he took out and said, "With us there are no slaves." "Where is Ligia?" inquired Vinicius. "She has gone out, and I am to cook food for thee. She watched over thee the whole night." "Why didst thou not relieve her?" "Because she wished to watch, and it is for me to obey." Here his eyes grew gloomy, and after a while he added, "If I had disobeyed her, thou wilt not be living." "Art thou sorry for not having killed me?" "No, lord. Christ has not commanded us to kill." "But Atacinus and Croton?" "I will not do otherwise," muttered Ursus, and he looked with regret on his hands, which had remained pagan evidently, though his soul had accepted the cross. Then he put on the crane and fixed his thoughtful eyes on the fire. "That was thy fault, lord," said he at last. "Why didst thou raise thy hand against her, a king's daughter?" Pride boiled up at the first moment in Vinicius, because a common man and a barbarian had not merely dared to speak to him thus familiarly, but to blame him in addition to those uncommon and improbable things which had met him since yesterday, was added another. But being weak and without his slave, he restrained himself, especially since a wish to learn some details of his life gained the proper hand in him. When he had calmed himself, therefore, he inquired about the war of the legions against Vannius and the Suevi. Ursus was glad to converse, but could not add much that was new to what in his time Aulus Plautius had told. Ursus had not been in battle, for he had attended the hostages to the camp of Atelius Hister. He knew only that the legions had been beaten, the Suevi and the Iatski, but their leader and king had fallen from the arrows of the Iatski. Immediately after they received news that the Semnones had set fire to the forest on the boundaries, they returned to haste to avenge the wrong, and the hostages remained with Atilius, who ordered at first to give them kindly honors. Afterwards Lygia's mother died. The Roman commander knew not what to do with the child. Ursus wished to return with her to their own country, but the road was unsafe because of the wild beasts and wild tribes. When news came that an embassy of legions had visited Pomponius, offering him aid against the Marcomanni, Hister sent him with Lygia to Pomponius. When they came to him, they learned, however, that no ambassadors had been there, and in that way they remained in the camp, when Pomponius took them to Rome. And the conclusion of this triumph he gave his king's daughter to Pomponia Graecina. Though only certain small details of this narrative had been unknown to Vinicius, he listened with pleasure, for his enormous pride of family was pleased with an eye witness that had confirmed Legi's royal descent. As a king's daughter, he might occupy a position at Caesar's court equal to the daughters of the very first families, all the more since the nation whose ruler her father had been had not warred with Rome so far, and though barbarian it might become terrible, for according to Atilius Hister himself it possessed an immense force of warriors. Ursus, moreover, confirmed this completely. "We live in the woods," said he in answer to Vinicius, "but we have so much land that no man knows where the end is, and there are many people on it. There are also wooden towns in the forest, in which there is great plenty. For what the Semnones, the Marcomanni, and the Vandals, and the Quadi plunder through the world, we take from them. They dare not come to us, but when the wind blows from their side, they burn our forests. We fear neither them nor the Roman Caesar." "The gods gave Rome dominion over the earth," said Vinicius severely. "The gods are evil spirits," replied Ursus with simplicity, "and where there are no Romans there is no supremacy." Here he fixed the fire, and said if to himself, "When Caesar took Galina to the palace, and I thought that harm might meet her, I wanted to go to the forest and bring legions to help his daughter, the king's daughter, and legions who have moved forward the Danube, for they are virtuous people, though pagan. There I should have given them good tidings, but as it is if ever Galina returns to Pompeia, Graecina will bow down to her for permission to go to them. For Christus was born far away, and they have not even heard of him. He knew better than I where he should be born. If he had come to the world with us in the forest, he will not have tortured him to death, that is certain. We would have taken care of the child and guarded him, so that never should he want for game, mushrooms, beaver skins, or amber, and what we plundered from the Suevi and the Marconi we would have given him, so that he might have comfort and plenty." Thus speaking, he put near the fire the vessel with food for Vinicius, and was silent. His thoughts wandered evidently for a time yet through the Lygian wilderness, till the liquid began to boil. Then he poured it into a shallow plate and cooled it properly said, "Glaucus advises thee, Lord, to move even thy sound arm as little as possible. Galina has commanded me to give thee food." Ligia commanded. There was no answer to that. I did not even come to Vinicius' head to oppose her will, just as she had been the daughter of Caesar's or a goddess. He uttered no word, therefore, and Ursus, sitting near his bed, took out liquid with a small cup and put it in his mouth. He did this so carefully, with such kindly smile, that Vinicius could not believe his own eyes, could not think him the same terrible Titan who the day before had crushed Croton, and rushing on him like a storm, would have torn him into pieces, but for Ligia's pity. The young patrician, for the first time in life, began to ponder over this. What can take place in the breast of a simple man, a barbarian, a servant? But Ursus proved to be nurse as awkward as painstaking. The cup was along amongst the Herculean fingers so completely that there was no place left for the mouth of the sick man. After a few fruitless efforts, the giant was troubled greatly, and said, "Lee, it will be easier to lead the anchors out of the snare." The anxiety of the legion amused Vinicius, but his remark did not interest him less. He had seen in circuses the terrible Urus, brought from wilderness of the north, against which the most daring bestiarii went with dread, and which yield only to elephants in size and strength. Hast thou tried to take such beasts by the horns? Inquired he with astonishment. Till the 20th winter passed me over, I was afraid, answered Usus. But after that it happened, and he began to feed Vinicius still more awkwardly than before. I must ask Miriam or Narsarius, said he. But now Lygia's pale face appeared from behind the curtain. I will assist directly, said she, and after a while she came from the cubiculum in which she had been preparing to sleep, as it seemed, for she was in a single close tunic, called by the ancients capitium, covering the breast completely, and her hair was unbound. Vinicius, whose heart beat with more quickness at sight of her, began to upbraid her for not thinking of sleep yet, but she answered joyously, I was just preparing to sleep, but first I will take the place of Ursus. She took the cup, and, sitting on the edge of the bed, began to give food to Vinicius, who felt at once overcome and delight. When she inclined toward him, the warmth of her body struck him, and her unbound hair fell on his breast. He grew pale from the impression, but in the confusion of impulse of desires, he felt also that was a head dear above all and magnified above all, in comparison with which the whole world was nothing. At first he had desired her, now he had begun to love her a full breast. Before that, as generally in life and in feeling, he had been, like all people of that time, a blind, unconditional egoist who thought only of himself. At present he began to think of her. After a while, therefore, he refused further nourishment, and though he found inexhaustible delight and presence in looking at her, she said, Enough, go to rest, my divine one. Do not address me in that way, answered Lygia. It is not proper for me to hear such words. She smiled at him, however, and said that sleep had fled from her, that she felt no toil, that she would not go to rest till Glaucus came. He listened to her words as to music. His heart rose with increasing delight, increasing gratitude, and he thought was struggling to show her that gratitude. Lygia, said he, after a moment of silence, I did not know thee hear her too. But I know now that I wish to attain thee by a false way. Hence I say, return to Pomponia Graecina, and be assured that in the future no hand will raise against thee. Her face became sad on a sudden. I should be happy, answered she. Could I look at her, even from distance? I cannot return to her now. Why? Inquired Vinicius with astonishment. We Christians know that acte, what is done on the Palatine. We Christians know through acte what is done on the Palatine. Hast thou not heard that Caesar, soon after my flight, and therefore his departure for Naples, summoned Aulus and Pomponia, and thinking that they had helped me, threatened them with his anger? Fortunately, Aulus was able to say to him, Thou knowest, Lord, that a lie has never passed my lips. I swear to thee now that we did not help her to escape, and we do not know, as thou dost not, what has happened to her. Caesar believed, and afterward forgot. By the advice of the elders I have never written to mother where I am, so that she might take an oath boldly at all times that she has no knowledge of me. Thou wilt not understand this, perhaps, O Vinicius, but it is not permitting us to lie, even in a question involving life. Such is the religion on which we fashion our hearts. Therefore I have not seen Pomponia from the hour when I left her house. From time to time distant echoes barely reach her, and that I am alive, and not in danger. Here a longing sighed Lygia, and her eyes were moist with tears, but she calmed herself quickly, and said, I know that Pomponia too yearns for me, but we have consolation, which others have not. Yes, answered Vinicius. Christ is your consolation. I don't understand that. Look at us. For us there are no partings, no pains, no sufferings, or if they come they are turned into pleasure, and death itself, which for you is the end of life, for us merely its beginning, the exchange of lower for a higher happiness. A happiness less calm for one calmer and eternal. Consider what most religion be which enjoys on us love even for our enemies, forbids falsehood, purifies our souls from hatred, and promises happiness inexhaustible after death. I heard those teachings in Ostrianum, and I have seen how ye acted with me and with Chilo. When I remember your deeds, they are like a dream, and it seems to me that I ought not to believe my ears or eyes. But answer me this question: art thou happy? I am, answered Ligia. One who confesses Christ cannot be happy. Vinicius looked at her, and though what she said passed every measure of human understanding. And hast thou no wish to return to Pomponia? I should like from my whole soul to return to her, and shall return in such be God will. Say to thee therefore return, I swear by my Lord that I will not raise a hand against thee. Ligia thought for a moment and answered, I cannot expose those near me to dangers. He said, do not like Plautiuses. Should I return, thou knewest how every news is spread through Rome by slave. My return will be noise about the city. Neither will hear it for surely through his slaves and punish Aulus and Pomponia, and at least take me from them a second time. True, answered Vinicius, frowning. That will be possible. He will do so, even to show that his will must be obeyed. It is true that the only forgot thee, or will remember thee because of the loss was not his, but mine. Perhaps, if he took thee from Aulus and Pomponia, he will have sent thee to me, and I could give thee back to them. Vinicius, will thou see me again on the Palatine? Inquired he. I said his teeth and answer. He set his teeth and answered, no, thou art right. I spoke like a fool. No. And all at once he saw before him a precipice, and it were without bottom. He was a patrician, a military tribune, a powerful man, but above every power of that world to which he belonged was a madman whose will and malignity it was impossible to foresee. Only such people as the Christians might cease to reckon with Nero or fear him, people, people for whom his whole world, with his separations and suffering, was as nothing, people from whom death itself was nothing. All others had to tremble before him. The terrors of the time in which they lived showed themselves to Vinicius in all their monstrous extent. He could not return Ligia to Aulus and Pomponia then, through fear, and the monster will remember her, and return on her his anger. For the very same reason, if he should take her as wife, he might expose her himself and Aulus. A moment of ill humor was enough to ruin all. Vinicius felt for the first time in life that either the world must change and be transformed, or life will become impossible altogether. He understood also this, which a moment before had been dark to him. In such times only Christians could be happy. But above all, sorrow seized him, for they understood too that it was he who had so involved his own life in Lydia's, that out of the complication there was a scarcely outcome, and under the influence of that sorrow he began to speak. Dost thou know that thou art happier than I? Thou art in poverty, and in this one chamber among simple people. Thou hast thy religion and thy Christ. But I have only thee, and when I lacked thee I was like a beggar without a roof above him and without bread. Thou art dearer to me than the whole world. I sought thee, for I could not live without thee. I wished neither feast nor sleep. I had not been for the hope of finding thee, I should have cast myself on the sword. But I fear death, for if that I could not see thee. I speak the pure truth in saying that I shall not be able to live without thee. I have lived so far only in the hope of finding and beholding thee. Thou dost thou remember our conversation in the house of Aulus? Once thou didst draw a fish for me on the sand, and I knew not what it may, its meaning was. Dost thou remember how we played ball? I loved thee then above life, and thou hast begun already to divine that I love thee. Aulus came, frightening us with Libitina, and interrupting our talk. Pomponia, at parting, told Petronius that God is one, almighty and unmerciful, but it did not even occur to us that Christ was thy God and hers. Let him give thee, me, and I will love him, though he seems to me a goddess slave foreigners and beggars. Thou sisters near me, and thinkest of him only, think of me too, or I shall hate him. For me thou alone art a divinity, blessed be thy father and mother, blessed and the land which produced thee. I shall wish to embrace thy feet and pray to thee. Give thee honor, homage, offerings, thou thrice divine. Thou knowest not or canst not know, though I love thee. Thus speaking, he placed his hand on his pale forehead and closed his eyes. His nature never knew bounds in love or anger. He spoke with enthusiasm, like a man who, having lost self-control, has no wish to observe any measure in words or feelings. But he spoke from the depth of his soul, and sincerely it was to be felt that the pain, ecstasy, desire, and homage accumulated in his breast had burst forth at last in an irresistible torrent of words. To Ligia his words appeared blasphemous, but still her heart began to beat as if wool tear the tunic enclosed in her bosom. She could not resist pity from him and his suffering. She was moved by the homage with which he spoke to her. She felt beloved and deified without bounds. She felt that that unbending and dangerous man belonged to her now, soul and body like a slave, and that feeling of submission to her own power filled her with happiness. Her recollections revived in one moment. He was for her again that splendid Vinicius, beautiful as a pagan god, he who in the house of Aulo had spoken to her of love, and rose as if from sleep, her heart half childlike. At that time he from whose embraces Ursus had rested her on the Palatine, as he might have rested her from flames, but at the present with ecstasy and at the same time with pain in his eagle face, with pale forehead, imploring eyes, wounded, broken, and loving, full of homage and submissive, he seemed to her, such as she would have wished him, and such as she would have loved with her whole soul, therefore dearer than he had ever been before. All at once she understood that a moment might come in which his love will seize her and bear her away as a whirlwind. And when she felt this, she had the same impression that she had a moment before, that she was standing on the edge of the precipice. What is to this that she had left the house of Aulus? What is for this that she had saved herself by flight? What is to this that she had hidden so long in wretched part of the city? Who was that Vinicius? An Augustian, a soldier, a courtier of Nero. Moreover, he took part of the profligacy and madness, and was shown by that feast which she could not forget. And he went with others to the temples and made offerings to vile gods, in whom he did not believe, perhaps, but still he gave them official honor. Still more he had persuaded her to make her his slave and mistress, and at the same time to trust her in that terrible world of the excess, luxury, crime, and dishonor which calls for the anger and vengeance of God. He seemed changed, it is true, but still he had just said to her that if she will think more of Christ than him, he was ready to hate Christ. It seemed to Ligia that the very idea of any other love than the love of Christ was a sin against him and against religion. When she saw then that other feelings and desires might be aroused in the depth of her soul, she was seized by alarm for her own future and her own heart. At this moment of sternest struggle appeared Glaucus, who had come to care for the patient and study his health. In the twinkle of an eye, anger and impatience were reflected on the face of Vinicius. He was angry at his conversation with Ligia had been interrupted, and when Glaucus questioned him, he answered with contempt almost. It is true that he moderated himself quickly, but if Ligia had any illusion as to this, what that what he had heard in Australia might have acted on his unyielding nature. Those illusions must vanish. He had changed only for her, but beyond that single feeling there remained in his breast a former harsh and selfish heart, truly Roman and wolfish, incapable not only of the sweet sentiment of Christian teaching, but even of gratitude. She went away at last, filled with internal care and anxiety. Formerly, in her prayers, he had offered to Christ a heart calm, really pure as a tear. Now that calmness was disturbed. To the interior of the flower, a poisonous insect had come and begun to buzz. Even sleep, in spite of the 2 nights passed without sleep, brought her no relief. She dreamed that Austrian Nero, at the head of the whole band of Augustinians, Bacchantes, Corybantes, and gladiators, was trapping crowds of Christians with his chariot racked with roses. And Vinicius seized her by the arm, drew her to the quadriga, and pressing her to his bosom, whispered, "Come with us."